Hi Planty Friend, it's Min. How you going? Today let's talk about some common issues that can occur with Ficus lyrata, otherwise known as the fiddle leaf fig. So let's get right into it now. Number one, reddish spots on the leaves. If you're finding reddish spots on your ficus, it's a sign of edema. What I mean by that is that the plant has absorbed and taken up its water through the roots, and now the water has gone all the way up to the leaves. And what happens is that if there is too much water stored in the cells of the leaves, the cells will actually burst and you get these reddish spots on the leaves. So it's a sign that there's too much water. So the best thing to do is to check the watering schedule. So make sure that the ficus is completely dry before watering it. Also making sure that the water is draining out of the drainage holes and the drainage holes are not blocked. Also getting rid of that excess water that drains out of the plant. Now if you do get those reddish spots, don't worry, if you change your watering and get it right, those reddish spots won't actually damage the leaves in the long term. Those reddish spots tend to fade over time, but the most important part is a sign of overwatering. So just trying to correct that would be the best thing to do. If you're finding, number two, if you're finding the leaves are falling off your ficus. So I'm not talking about one or two leaves, that's natural. A leaf will go through its cycle, it will photosynthesize and then it will become old and then it'll dry up and drop. So that's a normal cycle of a leaf. However, if you're finding that your ficus are dropping a lot of leaves, that's a sign of an issue with watering. Now it could be overwatering or it could be underwatering. So if it's overwatering, generally what happens is that the lower leaves of the plant will drop off first. So that's more a sign of overwatering. Now, if you're finding that the leaves are dropping all over your plant there, it's a sign of underwatering. Because what will happen is that with underwatering, the plant is basically dehydrated. The whole plant is completely dehydrated. So it will tend to drop its leaves all over the plant. So check your watering schedule. Sudden drop in leaves. Now, have you recently just purchased your ficus and put in the household? You don't know what's happened. You've given it the best watering, the best light position, but it's still dropping its leaves. Well, it could be the fact that it's just been moved. Ficus are very finicky plants. They don't like to be moved. So it's moved from the nursery, which it's received its best optimal condition, and it's gone into your household. Just make sure that your household actually has an environment that simulates more to what its natural environment is, and it should recover from that. However, if your ficus is in the household and you move to a different position than the household and then it's suddenly dropped its leaves, it's because it's finicky, it just didn't like to be moved. So definitely I would recommend move it back to its original position and hopefully it will recover from that. The other reason is that from overwatering, it's just, I know I'm saying it again and again, but it's true. Overwatering can kill a plant very quickly. So if you're prone to overwatering, just change your watering schedule and making sure that there's no root rot occurring. Brown leaf edges. So brown leaf edges, there's two common reasons for that. The first one is a sign of constant underwatering the ficus. So what might be happening is that maybe you are watering your plant, but not all the soil is getting watered. So what happens is there's some parts of the roots are not receiving enough water. The second reason is that maybe there is some damage to the leaves. So there's like minor damage. Maybe you walk past your ficus, you happen to knock onto it, or gently, sometimes you can't resist and touch the leaves, and sometimes that can cause damage to the leaves, and it ends up the edges of the leaves becoming brown and starting to curl up. Black or purple markings of the leaves. So this can occur if the plant is too cold. So Ficus lyrata like a temperature range between 10 Fahrenheit all the way up to about 85 Fahrenheit. That's approximately around about 10 degrees Celsius up to about 30 degrees Celsius. If it's too cold, that's the most common reason for that plant to actually end up with these purple or dark markings on it. It might not be the room might be warm, but maybe it's pressed against a window and the window is colder compared to the temperature in the household, and that can cause the markings. The other reason is that from constant overwatering the plant, it can end up with these black and purple markings on it. You can differentiate the two. For example, has the markings occurred quickly? If it's occurred quickly, it could be just a sudden drop in the temperature. But if it's occurred more over time, it's more of a sign that it's been constantly overwatered over a period of time. Discolored leaves. Now, just like humans, plants are not perfect. You're not always going to receive that gorgeous, huge, lush, green, paddle-shaped leaves. Sometimes they do discolor. Sometimes they don't come in the right shape either. And that's still fine. If you're finding one or two on your ficus leaf, that's normal. Just leave it alone. However, if you're finding a whole bunch of leaves discoloring, especially if it's a sudden change in the leaves, then it's time to see what's happening. So I'd recommend you first check for pests, check for any fungal disease and treat them appropriately, and also check the roots, because the other reason it could be root rot. And especially for someone like myself who tends to overwater my plants, I do tend to get root rot, and checking the roots is important, because what can happen is if there's root rot and it's not treated properly, it can actually kill the whole ficus. The whole plant can actually die. If you're finding root rot, which tends to have a funky smell coming out of the soil, the roots tend to be brown, mushy, just completely gross, then it's time to repot the plant. And it's emergency repotting, because you don't want the plant to sit in that soil. So what you want to do is repot it, get rid of all that root rot, and use fresh soil. The other reason could be from sunburn. What can happen is, even though a ficus does like sun, sometimes if there's too much direct sunlight, especially if it's more than half a day of direct sunlight, it can burn the leaves. So what can happen is the pigmentation in the leaves, that can actually discolor, and what happens is the whole leaf starts to go yellow. So try and rectify those things and see if that helps. Small or stunted growth. Now, first of all, check if your Ficus lyrata is actually a Ficus lyrata and not the bambino form, like what I did. I thought my first ficus was a Ficus lyrata with these huge paddle-shaped leaves. But no, mine was a bambino form, which means that the leaves are still in the paddle shape, but it's smaller and more compact. The other reason for the small leaves could be the plant is not receiving enough sunlight. Ficus are sun-loving plants, so move it in the area that receives more sunlight. It cannot tolerate low light situations. Sometimes it can't even tolerate medium light situations. I have my ficus in a south-facing window. It's almost right against the window, and it receives indirect sunlight all day long and afternoon direct sunlight. Also check the soil. Is there enough nutrients in the soil? So has it been a while since you repotted your ficus? Maybe it's root bound. So check for the roots. Check if the pot is root bound, which means that the roots are coming out of the soil. Now, ficus do like their roots to be compact and tight, but they don't like to be root bound in the sense that the roots are coming out of the drainage holes. Maybe the pot is distorted. That's time for the ficus to definitely be repotted into a pot that's one size higher. Try not to go higher than one size, because a ficus still likes its roots to be a little bit on the tight sort of side. Also, has the plant been fertilized? Has it been a while since you fertilized your ficus? I tend to fertilize my ficus once a month, as long as I see it's growing. So I use a product called We the Wild, and I reduce the concentration by 50% just to make sure that I don't burn the roots. And if you do find that you don't have that product in your area, no worries. Just go and get a well-balanced liquid fertilizer, but try and make sure that you reduce the concentration by 50% so that to ensure that the roots don't get burnt. If you want to know more tips on how to take care of your ficus, I'll pop a video link down below and above how to take care of Ficus lyrata. Weak or thin stems. Now, is your ficus a young plant? That is quite common for a ficus that's still young, still establishes roots, for the stems to be thin and weak. However, if your ficus is a mature plant and you're finding that your new growth is quite thin and weak, not as thick as previously, then it's a sign that there's lack of nutrients. So definitely fertilize your ficus. The other reason for it is that maybe it hasn't got any sort of airflow. So a ficus in the natural environment, it's up against the wind. So it's moving around there, so the stems have to become thicker. And that's what the plants will prioritize and do, make the stems thicker so it's less likely for the branches to actually drop. Now in the household, there is no wind, there's generally no draft, and so the stems become weak. So you might want to do it once a month where you gently shake the stem, and this will promote that plant to strengthen up the stems. Droopy or hanging leaves. Now, have you recently repotted your ficus? If you have, the plant may just be in shock. Repotting a ficus or any sort of plant, it puts the plant into shock. It doesn't like it, and so it's still establishing its roots in the new pot. So just give it time, just follow the normal care tips on how to take care of ficus, and it should recover from repotting, especially if you've done it in the spring or the summer season. I try to avoid repotting in the winter season because it's less chance for our ficus to actually recover from repotting during that season, and it may end up being stunted growth. The other reason for it is that the leaves can droop if it's been constantly dehydrated. So has it been a while since you watered your ficus? If you constantly underwater your ficus, the leaves will constantly droop, and unfortunately, if the leaves have drooped for a long period of time, even re-watering the plant thoroughly, it may not recover from that constant prolonged period of underwatering. So that's all the care tips I have and common issues for Ficus lyrata. If you have any issues with your ficus that you'd like me to answer, just leave a comment in the comment section down below and I'll answer your questions. If you have any care tips of your own, I'd love to read about it in the comment section down below. And if you did enjoy this content, watch this video next. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye!